on Instagram. Okay, folks. Chapter 8. Chapter 8 brings us to a conclusion of the Alter Rebbe giving us an understanding of the animal soul / natural soul. Chapter 6 began this understanding of the animal soul after Alter Rebbe defined for us the godly soul in chapters 2 through 5. So chapter 6, L'umas, was that the animal soul is a mirror reflection of the godly soul. Has 3 parts intellectual, 7 emotional components. It has also garments of self-expression, and its nature is, of course, self-directed to fill itself up more. And the idea of self-fulfillment is filling self, which is a human thing to do, which is the natural soul / the animal soul, as we've explained. We explained that there's a middle ground, that God creates everything in this world, which is klipas noigas, a shell that covers over, but there's some good in it, and we have the choice, we can elevate it, or it can be degraded. So you can have kosher food, it can be elevated, because you are using that food in order to give you strength so you could serve God, as opposed to degraded, the kosher food, by being gluttonous. Then you're bringing it down. That's the area where we have the power to bring it up or down. In the klipas noiga, the admixture of good and evil that so much of the world has been created with, and is an expression of the klipa, the energy, the divine energy that God animates the world with. This chapter, chapter 8, in one word, is osir, which means prohibited. What does it mean, of prohibited? So the Alter Rebbe explains like this. What happens if you ate something that's not kosher? We're talking for a Jew. Jew is obliged to eat kosher. What happens if unwittingly you ate something that's not kosher and you actually did it for the sake of heaven, right? You did it to serve God. You did it in order that you can have energy thereof from the food that you ate, in order to now, go to the hospital, visit the sick, or study Tanya. But mistakenly, it wasn't kosher food. And the fact is, after you ate that food, you actually engaged then in the study of Torah, as we're doing right now, for example. So what does that mean? How do we understand that? Where is the energy? Remember, God is animating everything in the world, every moment. So he's giving me energy, right? For me to pick up my hand, I choose to pick up my hand, but the energy to do that is an energy ultimately from God. So that energy could be to reach out to say hello. That energy could be to give charity, or God forbid, the energy that I'm getting could, and that's from holiness in those instances, or it could be a energy from above, a vitality from above, that it is from klipa, that you're using your hand in an appropriate way to hit somebody, God forbid, right? It's also a vitality that God is giving you in that moment. So it's coming from klipa. Shalosh klipas means from complete evil. So here you ate something that has now the divine energy that is shalosh klipas atmeas, but your intent was to eat this for the sake of heaven, and it was unwittingly. So Alter Rebbe says, and not only that, again, you actually learned Torah after that. So Alter Rebbe says it doesn't descend, and it doesn't become enclosed in the words of Torah or the words of prayer, and that energy that you get because that food was not permitted. It remains bound to shalosh klipas atmeas, to complete unholiness. That energy of that food, even though, it was a mistake. A metaphor, maybe, for us to appreciate that. Because, people think, well, isn't it bad? You didn't mean it. You didn't know any better. You did it unwittingly. You didn't mean to do anything wrong. Well, and God forbid, if you drank poison unwittingly, is it going to kill you? Of course. But I didn't mean to. I meant to drink, water. I meant to drink apple juice. And in the end, it was a different kind of. Obviously, it's going to have that effect nonetheless. Doesn't matter what your intent is. So the same thing is over here. When something isn't kosher and it is now ingested and becomes part of you, and then that part of you now gives you energy that you engage in doing good, that non-kosher will not be sublimated or elevated and then give you the divine energy that will help you to engage in that Torah study or any other mitzvah that you're doing. Why? Because that food was forbidden. And the word usr comes from the word bound, tied. It is tied to extraneous forces. It's tied and bound up to negative forces, period, just like poison kills. So this also is bound up as a result. And even if it's only a rabbinic prohibition, nonetheless, it is bound up to those negative extraneous forces of Sitra Acher, of the negative side, and can be elevated. So what we have over here, the Alter Rebbe says, we have, this is called non-Jewish demons in us. In other words, that when we have a desire for those things that are forbidden, it comes from the non-Jewish demon that's inside. You also have a Jewish demon inside, and that's for desiring things that are permissible, like kosher food, right? So when a Jew desires non-kosher food, it's a non-Jewish demon inside of them, because non-Jews could eat non-kosher, but a Jew can't, right? But then we also have a Jewish demon inside of us that desires to just enjoy life, to have pleasure from things. And the Alter Rebbe says that before that permissible thing could be elevated, we have to do tshuva. And even after we do tshuva, that is, then from then onwards, there'll be a trace. Actually, one second. There'll be a trace of negativity upon the soul. Because when you eat something, it becomes your flesh and blood. Immediately it becomes your flesh and becomes a part of you. Because it becomes a part of you, so now, since it was not with the right intent in order to serve God, therefore there's going to be a cleansing that the soul will need after its time in this world. And that's the concept of purgatory in Judaism. And the Alter Rebbe says that unless we do not seek the pleasure of the physical material things in our lives, right? We only use it for the sake of heaven, like Yehuda HaKadosh, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda, the prince. He is the author of the Mishnah, and before he passed away, he put up his small finger and he said, "I didn't." And he was an extremely wealthy person, so he had everything that one could desire at his fingertips, but he said, "I did not have any pleasure from it, even one small pinky." In other words, he was a holy person and was not motivated for the pleasure thereof. Now, what does that say about me, at least? And I'm sure all of us were motivated by material things, food, comfort in this world. We're motivated by that because that is a Jewish demon inside of us. The term that the Alter Rebbe is, the Jewish demon means the Jewish Yetzer Hara, that from those things that are permissible, we want to enjoy them, whether it's food or comfort of a home that we have, and the wealth that we have, and we use it for our benefit, for our comfort, and that itself means that there is some negativity in our soul that will need to be cleansed in the times of Mashiach. That's a reality. It's okay. We shouldn't get, we're all going to go through that unless we're righteous. But like a child that plays in the mud, the mother has to clean and scrub. Sometimes it hurts. So there'll be that cleansing process, but it's only a means to an end, the cleansing process. It's not an end in itself. In other words, punish, look at what you did terrible, God says, and therefore no. It's actually for our benefit. It's a benefit for us that we should be cleansed, because once we're cleansed, our soul is cleansed, then we can have the pleasure of the divine. If our soul isn't cleansed, we can't have the pleasure of the divine. And God wants to give us that pleasure. But if you get dirty, you need to be cleansed. Just like you need to be cleansed in this world. Sorry. Just like we need to be cleansed if we get dirty in this world, right? If you have a stain on your shirt, you cleanse it. There'll still be some little remnant left that needs to be cleansed further. So that doesn't mean we're bad people. That's not the point over here. The point is God is so loving of us that he wants to give us divine pleasure. You can't have divine pleasure when we are filled with stains and dirt. So there's a cleansing process. The Alter Rebbe goes further. Not just when it comes to actions, like eating something that's not kosher, right? We gave an example till now, but idle chatter, that we waste our time. So now, for some people who are ignorant, idle chatter might not be ignorant, meaning ignorant of Torah, and therefore Torah is not something that they are obliged to engage all the time in. So there might not be a prohibition. There wouldn't be a prohibition, but there's still an effect on the soul of such an individual, and there needs to be a cleansing. So part of the cleansing, interesting, that the Alter Rebbe gives is a metaphor called the hollow of the sling. It means that the soul is shown the truth, right? And then it sees its actions. What do you think the soul is going to feel? Terrible. Because when you see the truth, just imagine today today, when we're truly honest and we did something wrong. Excuse me a moment. Sorry. Imagine, today, you hurt a loved one. You hurt them. And you really, really own it. In other words, you recognize the truth of what you did. Is that not painful? It's extremely painful when you recognize that. You feel terrible. Now, how much of the truth can we really sense and feel today? It's limited, because we're not in the world of truth. We're in the world of lies. So as much as the truth is that I recognize, it's not a full truth. When I leave this world, and before my soul goes into Gan Eden, into the Garden of Eden, it will go through that process. It will recognize the truth, but in its full-blown manner. And therefore, there will be a great sense of remorse, a great sense of pain that the soul will feel, because we engaged in idle chatter. Especially if it's forbidden speech, like scoffing another person or slander. That was the example, was idle chatter. Then the hollow of the sling is not even sufficient. There needs to be a deeper cleansing of the soul, the Alter Rebbe explains, as a result. Now, in conclusion of this chapter, again, I want to bring this out very clearly. This is for our benefit. A mother or a father, but the nurturing of the mother is, for the sake of the metaphor, who says, my child, my son, my daughter, you're filthy. That's okay. I love you with your filth. And leaves the filth and doesn't put the child into the bathtub with hot water and take a scrubby to get the dirt under the nails, and to take a brush and take the girl's long hair and to comb it out to get out the dirt that's there. What kind of mother would that be? Again, or father, right? A horrific one. You don't want to give pain to your child. You don't want to give pain. You love your child so much. You don't love your child so much. If you really love them, you'll give them that pain because you need to cleanse them. Because when you're clean, life's on a different plane than when you're dirty, right? So that's the metaphor. God loves us, and therefore he'll put us through that for the benefit that afterwards we can live life on our soul, will experience things on such a different level. Because when you're dirty, when your soul's dirty, you can't appreciate the divine. When it's cleansed, then you can appreciate the divine. And that's what God wants to give us. So the Alter Rebbe concludes over here that a person occupies themselves with intellectual disciplines, science, and so on, in a way is neglecting the study of Torah. And the Alter Rebbe says in a way that's even worse than idle chatter. Because idle chatter, you affect the emotional being of you. But your intelligence, you're not really affecting, because it's, it's idle chatter. It's not really affecting in the sense that you're not warping it in the same way, because it's not really affecting it. It's an expression of your emotions, right? It's your emotions talking when it's idle chatter, talking about the weather, talking about, this is what I did yesterday, and I did oh, what did you do? How was your day? Okay, sometimes we need to engage a person that way so we can connect to them. But if that's our engagement is just idle chatter, then it's not a real engagement, right? It's idle. The point being that it's not affecting your Chabad, your Chachma, Bina, V'das, your wisdom, understanding, and knowledge as a result. But when you engage in intellectual disciplines of science and other, intellectual engagement that is not Torah, then you're affecting the Chabad, your intelligence. And that's the highest and greatest thing about the individual. Does that mean you can't study those things? So the Alter Rebbe says, you could, of course, only when it becomes an axe. Does an axe have a value in of itself? No. But through an axe, you can chop down a tree, and you have lumber to build a home. You have lumber to, create a fire to keep you warm in the winter, and so on. In other words, if it's an axe that can be used as a means to an end, in other words, the study of science, the study of whatever engagement of the world, of intelligence that there is in the world, that a person engages in those disciplines, if you're using it to serve God, because you're getting a parnasa, a livelihood as a result, then by all means, it's a means to an end. Or if you're like Maimonides or Nachmanides, or Rambam and Ramban, that they study these areas of science and other disciplines, because through it they served God through that knowledge. In other words, it brought them closer to God through that knowledge. They were engaged in those disciplines because those disciplines helped them in understanding Torah better. help them to serve God better, then those disciplines also have a value. But to engage in those disciplines for their own value as an end in itself, so the Alter Rebbe says that is you are affecting the mind in undue negativity that's even worse than idle chatter, worse than idle chatter. A very interesting idea. So we see here the Rebbe himself was an electrical engineer. He went to Sorbonne University in France. Yet the Rebbe, spoke about not going to college. Aside from the social things that happen in college that are not very healthy, but the actual study itself. On the other hand, to many people, he told them that they should go because that was their mission in life, what they needed to engage in various disciplines in order to fulfill what God, put them in this world for. But that was a means to an end rather than an end in itself. Torah, of course, is an end in itself. Mitzvahs is an end in itself. That attaches us and binds us to God. But also prohibited things, food, idle chatter, chatter that is scoffing another, all of that, and even intellectual disciplines are in themselves bound, also prohibited, that they're bound to the extraneous forces, negative forces, to sitra acher, klipa, shalosh klipas, to is complete unholiness, that it brings a person down. Of course, when it comes to intellectual pursuit, if it's a means to an end, that is to serve God, again, whether it's because you're making your livelihood or because of that it gives you a deeper connection to God through that, then it's a means to an end. And that's chapter 8. Powerful idea here. So one of the novel thoughts that we have over here is that you could, if you eat something that's not kosher, a Jew eats something that's not kosher, even though they do it for the sake of heaven, that energy of that food is bound to negative forces. It cannot be upgraded into holiness, into the words of Torah that I study or the mitzvahs that I engage in, because of the energy I get from that. And then finally, as we explained over here, the disciplines of the world are only a means to an end rather than an end in itself. And therefore, the notion that my child needs to go to college, is not a Jewish notion, not according to what the Alter Rebbe is explaining. If there is a means to an end, 50% of the people who go to college don't use their degrees in the end. And it's for the knowledge, for the experience, for sure not. But for the knowledge, well, a Jew is obliged to study Torah, and you can get all of that knowledge in the Torah. You need to make a livelihood? Oh, that's a different story. And, if you're going specifically for that, but not for the experience or for the intellectual engagement as an end in itself, right? Devoid or separating it from using it as a means to serve God, again, whether it's livelihood or the knowledge, because I'm studying psychology because I want to see how the psychology of Tanya is reflected in other forms of psychology. So it gives me a deeper understanding of Tanya as a result. Or I want to understand history so I can understand the unique history of the Jewish people, or God's hand in history and everything, and so on. So, much more to talk about that. All right. We have Ted with us. Moshe from Pennsylvania. Thank you for joining. Mark from Manalapan, New Jersey. Shavua Tov. And Elaine from Georgia. Shalom. Susanna, shalom. Jolyn, shalom. Shani, thank you for joining. Mary from the Philippines, good evening. Susan from Florida, Boker Tov. Alexander, Erev Tov to you in Israel. Thank you for joining. Joseph from Fort Worth, Texas. Question: what is the definition of Pas Yisrael as it relates to food items? A very good question. Pas Yisrael means that it's been baked with Jewish involvement. Yep, something that is an important thing. So if it's not Pas Yisrael, so then well, that's, you know, in today's day and age, we're able to get that. So then we for sure should try to get that. That's the preferred. Darren from Saskatchewan, thank you. Yes, thank you for your comment. Jean, welcome. Thank you, Cindy. Migs from the Philippines, thank you for joining. Laura from Nashville, Tennessee. Boker Tov. Batya from Austin, Texas. Good morning. Regards from David. Ashley. Yes, thank you. Linda, how does our soul get cleansed in the times of Mashiach? Okay, this is talking about not in the times of Mashiach. It's talking about after our stay in this world, 120 years. So that's what it's speaking about. In the times of Mashiach, the Ruach HaTuma Avi Min Haaretz, Hashem will take all the impurities away from the world, so that we'll be able to experience the presence of God, the realness of God, the truth of everything, and we'll be able to connect to it in a deep and profound way. So this is specifically not speaking in times of Mashiach, but after our lives in this physical world, I guess before Mashiach comes. What will be then? So how exactly that will take shape? It's a good question. Not 100% clear because it's not completely explained, but we will then experience true divine pleasure. Jose, thank you. Good morning. Moshe, no, my sniffles, it's nothing. Thank you, though, for your concern. Ingrid from Brussels, good afternoon. Claudia. Okay. All right, Rachel. Tom, how does making music fit into the concept of distraction from Torah? Well, if music is your livelihood, so then absolutely is one thing. And secondly, music can bring people closer to God. So, you know, if it's music that's not bringing people closer to their soul, that's the whole idea of music. The Alter Rebbe says music is the pen of the soul. So on the contrary, music has a great power. That's why it also has a negative power, a great negative power, as we see what music does to people in a negative way. But in the positive way, it all very much can bring people closer to God. And in Chabad, music is an integral part of divine service. So absolutely. Yeah, so it definitely has a place, and it doesn't mean just songs that are in Hebrew, or but things that its intended purpose is to bring people closer to God. For a Jew, to Torah mitzvahs, non-Jew, goodness and kindness. So absolutely, it's can be used. It's not inherently, not like a mitzvah. If you put on tefillin or you give charity, inherently there's a connection. Here, if the music is, it's like the klipas noiga, the middle ground, can be raised up or brought down. Okay. Cindy, thank you. Christina's asking a good question. Besides the 7 Noahide laws, what is meant for, what is God asking non-Jews to do? So the 7 Noahide laws have extension to it that is, more encompassing than 7 particular laws. We don't have the time or right now to go through that, but it's an excellent question. We need to do something about that at some point. Manuel from Guatemala, thank you for joining. So let me think about how to deal with that more. Banish from Philly, Marina from Toronto, Brian from Boston, Rivka from Germany, and Ahmed Okatov. On Instagram, Wildflower from India, thank you for joining. Terry, thank you. Sharon from St. Vincent. Sharing is caring. Yes. Please do share. Rio de Janeiro. Teofilio. I probably got that wrong. All right, folks. Sharing is caring. So please share the Alter Rebbe's teachings with others. We conclude Chapter 8, which concludes the definitions of godly soul, chapters 2 through 5, and 6 through 8, definition of understanding of the makeup of the animal soul / natural soul. And tomorrow we continue in further engagement. And what is that engagement between these two? I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you from Chabad, Zichron Kedoshim in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Have a wonderful week. A Shavua Tov, a good Tavach.